everyone, welcome to tonight's live stream. I am talking to you today about a question that I get quite a bit. And what made me think of doing this live stream today is that the question that I got today was slightly different. A lot of people ask me about making their own goat feed because most of the commercial goat feeds have ingredients that they don't understand, or maybe they contain genetically modified ingredients or something else that they don't want their goats to have. And so they don't have organic goat feeds in their area. So they want to be able to just buy organic grains and to make their own goat feed. And they want to know how to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of times they also don't want to use conventional minerals, which is what you definitely need in order to get the mineral balance correct. But the bigger problem with making your own goat feed is the fact that it's going to be very hard to get enough protein in it. And the main reason that we give goat feed to our milkers is to get that protein up. Goat feeds are typically 16% protein. That's what you need to be giving them, is 16% protein to produce milk. And you need that so that they can produce enough milk. At the end of pregnancy, if goats are getting 100% alfalfa, that probably has enough protein in it for them. But if it's even like 50, and they need at least 50% alfalfa for the calcium, 100% is better. But if your hay is only 50% alfalfa, then you probably do also need to be supplementing with some goat feed, 16% protein goat feed, to get that protein level up. Now, the way that the question was worded today that made me think about doing this live stream is that this person has been making food for her dogs and cats for years, and they've been doing great. And so she wanted to know why she couldn't make food for her goats when she could make it for her dogs and cats. And the answer for that came to me really quickly, and that is that your dogs and cats are not producing milk for you. Your dogs and cats are just pets. They have a very low stress life. Their nutritional needs are not as exacting as what goats are. And to make matters even more complicated is that goats are not from North America. We have taken them out of their natural environment. Their natural environment is like a desert. They do fine. And when I say natural, I mean, we're talking like way back at the beginning of time. Okay. In the beginning, they were in the Middle East in the desert. They did fine when, they took them to Europe and put them in the mountains, because the mountains have a lot of browse. You notice the things the mountains and the desert have in common is no grass, lots of browse. Any vegetation that grows there is going to be trees. And so, the old fashioned saying, goats should not eat below their knees. That's the way it goes in the desert and up in the mountains. So in the United States and Canada, most of us are trying to turn these browsers into grazers. And there are a lot of problems with that. Most of you have heard me talk about why this is a problem with parasites, but it's also a problem nutritionally, because browse actually has a lot more minerals in it than grass does. So if you wanted to feed your goats 100% naturally, most of us would not even be trying to raise them where we are. If I had known this 22 years ago, honestly, I probably would not have even gotten goats, because I wanted to do everything totally naturally. And in the beginning, I heard that ruminants don't eat grain in nature. And I actually tried to raise my goats without grain at all for a while. And that did not work well. I had skinny goats. They didn't make a lot of milk. So they definitely need a really excellent grain, which is a goat feed, a 16% protein goat feed, because it's not just the grain. So this is the problem, is that most people, if you try to buy grains, you hear a lot of people talking about corn, oats, and barley. Those are like candy. They have about half as much protein as what goats need. The reason that we are feeding goats the goat feed, the 16% protein goat feed, is to get their protein level up. And why do they need a higher protein level? Because they are producing more milk than what nature ever intended. And I'm talking about dairy goats here. There are a few people who have successfully raised meat goats. You've got to have the right genetics, basically. So I do know some people who successfully raise meat goats on pasture. But if you really want to raise your goats naturally, then you're not going to mix up a grain for them, because that's not natural. You would raise them on pasture or you would raise them on browse. And a few, like I said, there are a few that people have been able, some herds have been able to successfully have a forage-based goat herd for meat goats. Meat goats are not trying to produce milk for anybody other than their babies. That's it. They're trying to produce milk for like 2 babies for a few months. We are trying to get dairy goats to produce a lot more milk than that, and we want them to produce it for 305 days. Many of our dairy goats now will milk for 2 or 3 years. That has been our goal for quite a while now, is to, like, every doe in our herd that is over 2 years of age has milked for 2 years, 2 or 3 years. Because that became our criteria a few years ago, because a lot of people with backyard goats they want milk. They don't want to be having babies. They don't have a great way to sell babies. So it's really nice for them to have a goat that they can freshen only every 2 or 3 years, because then they don't have to worry about selling kids. So what happens if you say, well, I don't care if my goat makes a lot of milk. I'm just not going to feed her grain. Well, unfortunately, you can't tell the doe's body how to allocate its resources. So what will happen? Something's going to suffer. So the goat is probably going to get skinny, or not produce a lot of milk, or have a weak immune system, or some combination of those things. But like I said, you don't have a choice about which body function gets shortchanged. So you can't just say you'll be happy with less milk. People even talk about, like, oh, this goat is so great, she has such a will to milk. That means that she throws all of her resources into putting tons of milk in the pail, and she might get kind of skinny as a result. And she might have trouble with parasites as a result, because her body is putting all of its resources towards making that milk. Because for generations now, breeders have bred the best milkers to the best milkers. It was nothing fishy, like, no genetic modification or anything. If you just keep breeding the best milkers to the best milkers, to this, to the sons of the best milkers, then you're going to just keep increasing the milk production of those goats. They're just going to keep getting better and better. So I only know one person. I've known a lot of people through the years who've tried to not use commercial goat feeds for their goats. And I only know one person who really succeeded at that, but she lived in a place where her goats did get browse year round, and she was feeding 100% alfalfa. And on the milk stand, she fed 100% alfalfa pellets, which are basically alfalfa hay. So it's that same 16 to 20% protein that alfalfa hay has. So she was able to get that level of protein into her goats without giving them grain. And they had variety in their diet because they have browse 12 months a year. So what I always tell people, if it is really important to you to have milk produced by an animal on a completely natural diet, then a heritage breed of cow from a herd with good grass-fed genetics is a better option, because they are naturally grazers and they can thrive on pasture alone. We used to raise Irish Dexters, and they got nothing but pasture all throughout the growing season. And then in the winter, they got hay, and they did a fantastic job of raising big, beefy kids. The thing is, if you want to milk an Irish Dexter, you're not going to get much more milk than what you get from a goat. So it's a big animal. It eats a lot. It poops a lot. But if you've got the grass, to feed them, then you don't mind how much they eat. So that is a much better option for you than trying to force a browser to be a grazer and not giving it the extra protein and minerals that it needs to be able to produce the amount of milk that they've been bred for many generations now to be able to produce. So next Thursday, May 30th, I am going to be doing a free webinar on how not to kill your goats. And we're going to have that registration information available real soon. And I'll be talking about that more within the next week. But this is just one way. You're probably not going to kill your goats if you try to make your own feed. So I'm not going to be talking about that. But you can wind up with some skinny goats. You can wind up with goats that have really low resistance to parasites and a poor immune system. So like that ultimately could just cause things to spiral down for a while. So it really is a challenge to try and have goats perform at their best if milkers to perform at their best if they're not getting a 16% goat feed. 16% protein goat feed. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to post in the comment section below and we will get back to you. Bye for now.